wanted to create a category rather than try to compete in an existing category. People to abstract the complexity across multiple networks. I
We want to democratize all of Web3.
People will be looking at these agent platforms and saying, what's the total wallet value of all the agents on Wayfinder?
Deploy like an entire ecosystem of like contracts that work with each other.
And I always leave this part out because I don't want to like scare anyone with this story.
The following conversation is with Carlos and Adrian from Wayfinder and Parallel. Parallel TCG was the original product that hit the Web3 market for Parallel.life. And then from there, we saw the emergence of Colony as well as Wayfinder.ai. The conversation really dives into understanding how Parallel, who started with a trading card game, ended up where they are today, leading and trying to push the boundaries of how AI is used within Web3. We really do spend a lot of time trying to understand the different areas of competition, as well as how Wayfinder is differentiating themselves from other agents, as well as other platforms that we see, and how they're trying to remove the friction layer that a lot of people have, make crypto and transactions and even strategies more accessible to more people. And it really does kind of lead to this understanding of how we are going to see a huge reshaping of not only participants, but activity on the blockchain through what they are doing. I love it. It's a great conversation. I left very excited. I had to actually step away from the computer after the conversation, just kind of decompress. So I really hope you enjoy the conversation. Huge thanks to our sponsors, 555, Futureproof, as always, for making these possible and supporting. And yeah, thanks for watching once again. Love the feedback. Appreciate the comments and connections everybody has been doing to help push this forward and make these better. But yeah, enjoy the conversation, and we'll see you after the show. Right now, in the world of AI, gaming, everything that surrounds that, there's a company that cannot go without mention right now, and that is Parallel, as well as Wayfinder. You guys are part of the founding team and leading the charge at Parallel. Firstly, can you guys introduce who you are for people who don't know who you are? And then we can get into what is happening at Parallel and Wayfinder.
Sure, Adrian, you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my name's Adrian Haldenby. I head up AI and data at Parallel and Wayfinder. Before that, I was in like product and agency and consulting before starting at Parallel with Carlos here.
Yeah, so my handle's Kalos. My name's Sasha. I work on product and kind of overall strategy for Parallel Studios. I come from, I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade now, built some successful companies, had failures, both sides of that. And prior to that, I worked for 11 years at TD Bank Financial Group, designing stock trading systems, anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing systems, and real estate secured lending systems. And yeah, I think I'm fortunate to work with a really great group of people, including Adrian, and we're happy to be here. So thanks for having us.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, Parallel started as TCG, and it's grown to be so much more than that. And now you guys are approaching Wayfinder, which we'll get into in more detail. But originally, you are a Web3 gaming company to many, and now.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys a gaming company that incorporates AI? Are you an AI company that's leveraging, attacking the gaming industry? Like, how would you define it?
I think it's just like a logical extension of things. Like, we started as Parallel TCG, and that's obviously, what we're mostly well known for. And we started taking the assets. So obviously the cards appear 2D. The artists actually work in 3D, and we had all this massive repository from the cards of 3D assets from Parallel, and we wanted to make another game. And we wanted to create. We've explored what that might look like. We created an ARPG kind of demo in UE5 and a bunch of other stuff. And the conclusion we came to is that like competition's expensive and category leaders, eat. And so what that means is like, if you think ARPG, you typically think Diablo. And so you don't want to actually, you want to create a category. You don't actually want to compete in a category that's already existing, because the incumbent will win.
Right.
Well, I mean, you can still, there is still examples of stuff that works, but it's just much harder. And so at the time, the Google Simulacra paper had come out, and Adrian, coming from an ML AI background, at the time it was more popular to just call it ML, showed me the Google Simulacra paper and was like, this is remarkable. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Google Simulacra paper, it was a paper where a bunch of AI agents were allowed to kind of be let free and talk to each other in a simulation, and they organized a Valentine's Day party, which is an indication of emergent behavior. And the first thing I said after reading it when he sent it to me was like, where can I play it? And he's like, you can't, it's just a research paper. And I think that's where like Colony came from. So we took all these 3D assets and we said, well, hey, like there's something really interesting here that people are going to be super curious about, which is, what is it like if AI, there's a game where AI agents are the player and you're more like the devil or angel on their shoulder. And what if we marry that with scarcity, like our world? So in the real world, if you dig, deep far enough down a hole and pull out all the minerals, you have a possibility, an RNG, chance of pulling out gold or silver or copper or whatever. And so what if we kind of took the real world principles of scarcity and applied it to Colony, so that these AI agents are now in a simulation where everything in the simulation is an on-chain scarce asset. And they played the game, and we thought that made a lot of sense. Like, when one of the major categories on kind of and behavioral patterns of the world today are that like people watch other people play video games. Like, so what's the difference if an AI agent's playing the game? We also thought like people feel, like they don't have enough personal time. And so like, what if we made the game more passive, and that like the agent is again the player and you're supporting them?
Right.
So I think there's just like a lot of things that compounded that created this new segment. And from there, you look at this game where, I know this is a long answer and I'll kind of turn it back.
It's a great answer though. There's tons of ways we could branch off of this.
Yeah. And so from there, so you've got the TCG, created these 3D assets, made the decision that we wanted to create a category rather than try to compete in an existing category. And that's kind of where Colony, this AI simulation game, came from. And then we started to observe, we did a public test. A bunch of people got to play this very early version of it. The actual game is scheduled to come out in Q1 this year on mobile. And we started looking at it, and we realized essentially what we had was this agent. And like, social agents have become very popular now. In Colony, you can give your agent a character, and it has attributes and all these things. But, we realized we had this agent that had access to a very limited subset of smart contracts. Like the agent's access is limited to the contracts that the game simulation says it's allowed to access. So like the mining contract, the marketplace contract.
You're in a walled garden.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question kind of, it begs when you see that and play with it long enough, and this was like a year and a half ago we did this. The question it begs is like, how do you take the dog off the leash? How do you allow an AI agent to interact with the ecosystem of everything that's being built in blockchain? And how do you map that ecosystem and create a framework whereby those agents can navigate new things as they populate and are created? And how do you ensure that there are incentives to create the best map and the most accurate map, to do that efficiently? And so really, they're almost like this natural extension from one another. Parallel, we continue to release expansion sets. It's obviously an incredible game in and of itself.
It is.
And then thank you. And then you've got, Colony, which is this kind of like, okay, we're going to break new ground. And it's really hard. It's actually very difficult to create a new type of game, because you have very little reference to, like, when you don't realize how valuable having a reference point of something is. When you can like look at an ARPG and be like, oh yeah, that's what's good about it. It's a lot harder when there's nothing to reference. You're just kind of creating it for the first time.
Yeah.
And so that's Colony. And then the natural extension from Colony is like, hey, this could be a really valuable tool for people to abstract the complexity across multiple networks. I think right now we support like 7 or 8 networks. And that's going to go up exponentially. And how do we, put that tool into people's hands to make it really easy to navigate blockchain infrastructure in general as like a co-pilot-like system, and also as an autonomous system? So I'll stop there, because I think that paints like a pretty detailed but broad,
right. But it
stroke.
shows the evolution of like, you guys started here with the game. How do you apply AI against the game? Oh wait, there's something here. how do we actually take this AI though and apply that outside of just our ecosystem and address the broader crypto ecosystem? Hopefully that's logical thought process, against what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, you got it.
The hardest part there, though, that I think a lot of people, and we've obviously seen this on the social agent side, which is there has not been a lot of output from these agents outside of just text and accessing a data terminal and outputting. And you guys are addressing actual use on smart contract and making decisions from a user's input. The risk there obviously being those integrations are hard to do. The mechanism for bringing in those integrations, what is the incentive structure for somebody to do that?
Sure. So I think the interesting thing is the people who are doing this type of stuff would probably have very different opinions about what the hard part is from people who traditionally come from the blockchain space. But the incentive structures are really, twofold. So one, there's a bounty. So let's say someone asks a question, like let's say like someone says, and Wayfinder's never attempted this no one's asked it this question. And the question is like, let's take USDC and put it into Moonwell. And it says, oh, I can't do that, but I created a bounty. And so now there's a bounty, and someone who knows how to do that picks up the bounty, and there's no coding here. You're just saying, here's the context, here's the deposit address, here's how, here's the token in context. You're providing it with the contextual information that the base foundational model doesn't have. And the framework then it kind of ingests that. And so then, it then goes through a process which Adrian can explain maybe. And then that wayfinding path after it becomes validated gets one, collateralized with prompt, and two, earns as a result of being available to everyone. The next time someone asks and puts a transaction through it, a small percentage of the total volume that's moved through it goes to the person who created the path. And so essentially you're kind of teaching it to do new things, and you're getting economic benefit from one, teaching it, and two, from volume that passes through that path as a result of how much collateral you've put up. And the collateral acts as a security mechanism. Even with AI validation, even with human validation, there's collateral there to say, like, if something does go wrong and it's nefarious as a result, or something changed and it's nefarious, we can slash that collateral. And if nothing's wrong, then those people who put up that collateral and created that path are going to earn a throughput of everything that passes through that node every time someone asks to do it. I don't know, Adrian, am I doing it justice?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the economic incentives are that, like, as you expand the network, you get a little piece of that network,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
And the way that you expand the network is like pretty intuitive for the average person. Like, I guess to back up a little bit, there's a few main agents that you can use, and then you can use them to like compose other agents. But like the main sort of like foundational agents are the transaction agent, where you can go and you can say like, oh, I've got some Sol, I want to go like loop staked WETH in Aave, and then go, take that over to Polygon and I don't know, stick it in KlimaDAO or something like that.
Right.
And it'll, go through the process to figure out how to do that with both this like standard stock set of activities that it can do, as well as these user contributed ones. So then, yeah, as Kalos was describing, if for some reason we didn't have the like KlimaDAO vault or something like that, then it would error out and say like, oh yeah, well, like we can't do this specific thing. We've tried a bunch of stuff. We can't do it. Like, this is maybe a good candidate for a bounty. And then that gets like slightly more incentivized. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's a really hard problem to solve, because you are talking about adding more networks, adding more access, and that creates exponential like pathed interactions. And then on top of that, like, you might not have a new interaction for a new chain, but then you have somebody who's like looping, like that's then a strategy on possibly even multiple chains. And so that like then becomes a almost kind of like who has the best strategies to follow. And then you have, I mean, it gets very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, I think it's just removing some of the necessity of us clicking at times, right? Like to be able to execute these things efficiently and to be able to just say like, I want to loop a transaction on this test net because I'm going to be able to potentially generate yield if they drop tokens to people who do transactions on it. Like very doable today. Um,
And clicking
but
on the wrong thing, I should add too, is like we don't want you don't want to click on the first Aave thing on Google and end up
Right.
depositing and getting totally like
yeah,
whacked.
yeah, the mental load, right, of like needing to memorize like which bridge you use for everything, and like it's just there's a lot of complexity to the space, whether or not we want to acknowledge it. And the objective here is to just like give you a partner who understands and how to do this efficiently, and remove some of that burden, so you can just do the thing you want to do. And I think there's probably going to be like like a version of the product that's for people who contribute to the networks and paths, and a version of the products for just for people who want to use it. Like if you're sitting with your friends having a drink, you've never really traded that much, you want to just pick up your phone when your friend says like, I don't know, dog with hat is really awesome. You're going to pick up your phone and just say like, hey, take like 500 USDC from base, bridge it to Sol, and buy dog with hat. And that's it. Like that's your version as a consumer.
Right. Are you guys taking custody of user funds? Is that happening through trusted execution environment? Is that how is that being handled?
There's a few different ways. So on these like more I guess interactive agents, so the like the transaction agent and the contract agent, the like builder agent, there's you have like a passkey. So you use a partner turnkey now that does the passkey management for us, and so the wallet's yours. You authenticate the wallet to do or the agent to do transactions for either. I mean, it's up to you. You can say like, I want to finger down for like every single one of the approvals and like swaps and all that, or you can say like, okay, just like I give authority to the agent for this period of time to just send the transactions through. That's for the more interactive agents. For the more autonomous ones, well, the autonomous agent, there's right now it's like in a little environment where it like will ask you to do the transaction, but yeah, we're moving over to a TE where it'll just run for you if you want it
I
to.
think the future of trading will mostly occur within TEs.
Yeah, I agree.
I very strongly feel that way. Unfortunately, they're not very well understood by people. So there's going to be a learning curve there, but they're very important. I tweeted last night, I said the need to sleep has once again cost me millions of dollars. You guys are fixing that problem, hopefully for me, where while I sleep, there can be an agent that is executing either a particular strategy or my specific strategy, or like how, because I was thinking about this. If you have autonomous agents and they're just going, okay, well, the Fed cut rates and everybody, and it's a single strategy for everybody. Well, that takes out some of like like the efficiency of like market and free thinking and like edge. How do you guys approach that as like an autonomous actions?
Yeah, I mean, so you kind of curate the input to the agent. So you say, as it stands now, you say like, this is when I want you to wake up, and this is the information that I want you to wake up with. So it'll go on like a particular, like whatever tick you set it to. It'll say like, I mean, the one that I like using the most is take a look to see what the lowest or the highest stablecoin yields are on Aave, and then also listen to Aave's Twitter to see if there's any like special announcements that are released, and just like position yourself according to that. You say like what it is that you want it to digest, and then also you give it a bit of a directive as to like what you want to do with it, and then you kind of like open up the whatever additional tools that it should have at its disposal, and like give it some a couple of constraints, and then you let it go. So it's really on you how you want to compose your agent. And there's like there's infinite possibilities even in the like
for
set.
those who have used like Eliza character files. I think this is an easy rep. Like, is it like it's kind of that same idea of like bring in like strategy guidance. Here's my thesis, but and then execute on top of this like base knowledge and preference.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's slightly more transaction focused
Gotcha. Okay.
versus
Okay.
the social side. But yeah, definitely, it's like analogous to that. And yeah, and the colony side too. We had something similar to that. Like when I feel like that's more that feels a little bit more towards like the game agents where like they have a you know some sort of thing that they want to do, and they've got a style, and they're like they've
Right.
got a personality to
Right.
it. And this one, the autonomous agent, I guess for most of the stuff that we're seeing being tested right now, is a little bit less about that, more like utilitarian.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll change a lot.
Yeah, and like coming back to your question, Hunter, like I think like there's this assumption that like everyone's just going to have this like if the Fed does this, do this strategy. I think those inputs are what's going to differentiate. Like it's not like everyone's just going to be sitting on that one strategy. I think depending on what the strategies you suggest, like it's really limited by your creativity. And so if you wanted to watch X, Y, or Z, and then as a result, do buy or sell or on margin or not or whatever, leverage or not, I think like that's where the delta is going to be. And like there probably will be a cohort of people who implement some pretty basic strategies around inflation or kind of Fed data. But I think that like I think there's maybe this assumption at times in the market that like, oh, you're just gonna be like, go make me money. And like, I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think it's going to work a lot more like, here's the idea I came up with. What would be the best way to do this? It's like, well, maybe we watch this. Okay, like, well, let's try that. And so I think that's kind of where there may be some delta in the opportunity and return. So I think this is to say you don't lose edge. You actually gain edge, and you do less work gaining that edge. But I think the question is like your edge is going to be dictated by your creativity. In terms of what strategies you do come up with, and those are not public, right? Those are your autonomous agents, kind of conditional transaction functions that are predetermined, that are determined by you. And so maybe anyone could do that, but no one can see that that's your agent's strategy.
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
When you start to think about like the new world of transactions, much alike in the media industry, right? We went from like print to radio to then television to then desktop, and now mobile is kind of like main consumption. What we've seen on the blockchain side is it started in a terminal, and then we went to contract based UI, then to DEX and centralized exchange, and then I mean now we're kind of at a world where is the future chat and voice interaction with the blockchain? Is that how most people will interact? Like, I mean, I just think about like where we are today and how I transact and how different that is from way, way, way back in the day. I mean, what do you think the real future of like blockchain transactions look like?
Do you want me to take a stab, Adrian, or do you want
Yeah,
to
go for it.
Yeah, so I don't think like charting and transacting is going to go like the kind of the way we classically do it today is going to go away immediately. I think there's still a place for that, but I think there's this kind of market segment where it's like you don't always need to do that, and sometimes you want to act really quickly, and you don't want to you don't need to be looking at the chart as much as you need to just simply like ask for the execution to occur. I think the current trajectory. Let's just speak more like technologically, crystal ballish here. I think we do go to collapse to natural language, because and on top of that, like I think we kind of progressively find our way to computer brain interfaces and kind of more sci-fi like things. That's the path we're on, as a society, as a people, as humans. And I think also like you think about the efficiency of computers, and and if you start to zoom out and say like there's going to be these autonomous agents, sure, like we're going to be the first stepping stone is like there's co-pilot agents, we're there today. Then there's these autonomous agents, and they act on directives. And then there's like kind of like, let's say, like sentient agents, and that is going to have its own parameters and directives, and maybe some safeguards or whatever it may be. And I think like as that occurs in the markets, it occurs, in particular as it relates to blockchain, it also occurs in the real world. Incredible amounts of investment has gone into, self-driving cars and AI for that, and robotics and AI for that. And I think we're going to see that kind of pattern apply going forward. So I do think it's the future. I think that, over time, the vast majority of people will interact this way. There will always be people who are more on the contributor side, meaning that they do use a terminal, they do, interact and teach Wayfinder things because they want the opportunity, right? Like a new network popped up, they teach it how to bridge to that network, they teach it how to swap on that network, they teach it how to farm on that network. And then when the next person finally hears about it, they're just going to be the person who says, bridge to this network and buy this token and do it on a loop. And so I think, I think the objective, though, ultimately is to abstract complexity. And I think the narrative in crypto has been very interesting around like how to do that. And then I think AI all of a sudden popped up as like this very viable solution to achieving that, where the requirement on you as a human is much lower to achieve your goals versus and the automation provided you incredible opportunity that you otherwise didn't have, be it when you're sleeping or in immediacy of execution upon news release, or a lot of different things. And so I think the question is like, are we going to get more efficient? Is really what the question boils down to. And the answer is always like efficiency and capability will always win since the dawn of man and fire.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's what we've seen in every single other industry for the history of our lives. With that though, like when you solve this problem of inefficiencies in interaction, it also brings in other areas of like pain points. You're putting more stress on networks because transactions go up. You have more new users coming in. Now you have like like what's your onboarding or inflow for new capital look like? What do you think is like the one spot that like, do you have any worries for like this new frontier we're pushing into of like, oh, that really needs to be addressed and soon?
I think the things you just described are actually things that networks want. I think they want more volume, they want more transactions, and I think our objective should be to push up against the barriers of that and see who actually can provide network throughput that or transactions per second that manages it. And I actually think we'll find ourselves in this weird state maybe like a year or two from now where people will be looking at these agent platforms and saying, what's the total wallet value of all the agents on Wayfinder or whatever else? And they'll be thinking like we should be building and ensuring that we support as many different things as possible, because if we don't have that support, then that wallet value probably won't find its way, or actually simply cannot find its way to our network. And I think
yeah, that's actually crazy because when you start thinking of AI frameworks on top of like an L2, then that's a whole nother integration layer that, if I start another network, all of a sudden I have to be able to map all the way to these agents,
yeah,
and make sure that there's a way for them to interact. And that, I mean, that becomes exponential, technically.
exactly. Yeah, it becomes like an order router for all networks, ultimately, which is interesting to think about. And we're theorizing right now, right?
Right.
But I think, yeah, like I think you have to solve some of these problems early on. Like you're asking, what are some of the foreseeable issues? I don't think we have the potential. Like Wayfinder doesn't solve, transaction per second or support issues that'll be presented as a result of the networks themselves. Um, but I think like ensuring you have the fastest, smallest, and most efficient model from a cost standpoint will be very important. Ensuring the accuracy of the contributions of the network to mapping the world is very important. That verification, the collateralization, and the trust and the total throughput on those paths. Um, I think there's like it's almost like any hard problem, right? You end up having you almost trade when you solve a hard problem. You almost trade one hard problem for 50 medium to small size problems. But that is the prize, right? And the prize is that you've overcome the first part of your journey, but you've got so many other things. So I think we haven't arrived at a place yet where that first that inflection point has been reached. Um, I think we anticipate a number of problems that are like fundamental in the on the technology side. I think a lot of the infrastructure is there for like the kind of more blockchain stuff. I actually think we're pretty like well positioned on that front. I think it's more on the AI side, and it's not stuff that people think. People often like take this
Like
position
what?
of like, yeah, people think like, oh, it's like, what if the agent hallucinates and does this thing? It's like that's like a really easy thing to safeguard for the most part when it comes to Copilot transactional agents. Then there's also like vectors of attack, like, oh, like if I have a conditional transaction that like monitors Google for something to occur, and then someone creates a website and then uses that to to trigger the oracle's execution. And so like there are things like this, but like there's a lot of methods in which you can control, and they're actually lesser problems than some of the more AI, like kind of pure technology related problems. I don't know, Adrian, you probably have a different set of problems that you think about.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that a lot of the kind of Web3, not so much the change themselves, but the Web3 kind of like infrastructure and tooling is not really built for agent scale. Like we're consistently running into like request errors and thresholds and stuff all over the place. And so we've had to bake in like so many fallbacks and fail safes all over the place just for like getting pieces of data that we need, or like getting transactions simulated and things like that. I think that that's going to improve a lot over the next little while as agents become like some of the main consumers of this blockchain.
I mean, we're
stuff.
even just seeing that on like X. If you're trying to even just launch a social agent, you're
Yeah.
running into, you have to run a residential proxy, and you have to make sure that you're not breaking guidelines, and that you're not like, I mean, there's a million little things that are like, okay, why can't there just be an API here? I assume Elon and X understand that there's a lot of money to be made there, just charging, $100 a month for, an agent API access. But when you
Yeah.
scale that out, that's happening across the entire industry because we haven't had these use cases before, and it feels like it popped up out of nowhere. But you guys have been working on within the AI realm for quite some time. Wayfinder, I think, is a little bit. It has come obviously after Colony, but you guys were kind of trailblazing before this was even a hot topic within the Web3 community, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, coming back to what Adrian was saying about some of the like the infrastructure and, the APIs and stuff, I think like really early on, I started tweeting out being like, like if your APIs aren't stable, like, if like the agents aren't going to use this stuff, if you're like, everyone needs to start battle testing their infrastructure more. And it's not like their blockchain infrastructure. It's oftentimes like their data providing, their APIs and their data hookups. And so like, I think we saw that pretty early on, and I started tweeting it out, just being like, please like work on your infra a bit, because like we want to use this stuff. Yeah, we were really early, right? I mean, like I think Colony came out in its first alpha test where you could play what would be essentially like a parallel themed version of the Google Simulacra paper. It was like a year and a half ago or something. And then the Wayfinder paper actually was shortly followed it. So about a year ago, we published Wayfinder's paper as we were working through some of this stuff. Was it about a year ago? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, we saw the opportunity pretty early, and we really thought about it like, if there's anything that's worth working on, outside of parallel, like this is it. Because just the enormity of the opportunity is just huge. And not just to make everyone's life who's in the blockchain space easier, but and to create efficiency and value for them, but also to allow other people who otherwise would never be able to kind of get involved in the complexity, allow them to come in. And I know there's always this like argument that like, oh, like the harder something is to do, the more that there's value in it. That's kind of like, I've seen this narrative like from time to time from some of the more sophisticated players in this space. It's almost like the harder it is to figure out how to bridge, the harder it is to figure out how to like, get a wallet and set it up and do a transaction on this new network to farm it, the more value there is in that.
100%.
And I think that barrier just gets blown out of the water. I think that's game over already, because now the efficiency and the opportunity is for the person who teaches the agent to do it so that everyone can do it. And so the opportunity becomes taking these, generic kind of models and providing them the context so that, they democratize that capability. Wayfinder is not just isolated to transacting across these networks. It can, create smart contracts, be them tokens or kind of, traditional smart contracts. And I think we posted like this 3-video thing showing you like creating a smart contract, calling a smart contract and executing on that function so that, once it's been upgraded. And the general theory there is like, if the incentive is on teaching it, providing it with context to perform functions it otherwise wouldn't be able to, what you're really doing is you're creating the most capable agent. Because like we're not competing on intelligence. There's going to be a number of massive AI research firms and be it ChatGPT or like just different groups that are really investing billions in that. We can't win there, but what we can do is be the most capable. And I think that's where the incentives lie. And I think so. Long short is that the incentives go from like, oh, there's alpha here because it's very hard to do, to being like, oh, allowing everyone to do that thing is actually now where the value is.
Yeah, you guys, the way I've looked at it is you can try to compete on the most strategic and high IQ type of agent possible, which is, I mean, it's a totally valid area to compete. But we all like to joke about quants. You're going up against some of the smartest people in the world. And it will be one that is like, I mean, the same way we see the MEV industry right now, like you're just competing for such a small like edge at the very top. That it is pretty cutthroat. Or you could build out the pipes and the sewers and have the connections that allow everything to happen and own that volume and own those fees and own that mind share of, oh, well, that happens over here on Wayfinder. I lean obviously towards the less, I think, because I'm no genius. I would rather go build somewhere where I know I have competitive advantage on, hey, I understand how all these things just work together. Why don't I just build that path?
Yeah.
You do raise another good question here. There's so many other agents and frameworks that people are familiar with right now. AIXBT currently runs with the highest mind share in this space. And obviously there's no one-to-one with what you guys are building. There's some similar ones. Graphane, another one. What, to people listening who want to know, like, wait, Wayfinder is completely different, and this is like how they are addressing an area that nobody else is, and this is why they're unique. What is that pitch to them?
Do you want to go, Adrian?
I mean, I think that the pitch is mostly optimized for reach, not for like optimization. We want to make it so that like we want to democratize all of Web3. We think that AI is like the perfect answer to crypto. Like crypto is all these like discrete little contracts that live all over the place. It's all open source. So it's like the perfect thing for AI to come in and just be like the glue that sticks all of this stuff together. And we just want to like index everything, and we want to make it so that you can do anything that you want to as easily as the next person in on-chain world.
Yeah, I would say that like there are some pretty material differences in the nuance of how we handle things versus how other projects do. I think there are some projects that are isolated to specific networks. We're not. We're kind of available across all networks. We don't just isolate to transactions. Like I know there's this big movement around a couple different projects that are starting to look at how to do this. I think the questions for those projects are going to be, and for ourselves as well, like are going to be around how do you scale that efficiently around the model. But I think outside of transactions, Wayfinder can actually again build and deploy smart contracts. It essentially you can like dictate what you want. You can say like I want you to build a contract that does X, Y, and Z, be it a token contract or a smart contract or whatever it is, and it'll write the code, it'll edit the code, it'll deploy the code, and it'll create a front end so everyone can use it. And then on top of that, you have these kind of like org structure agents. So most of these projects are really isolated to like, hey, I want to do this transaction. Wayfinder is like, it does that, and it does that really well, and it does it differently than everyone else does it, and incentivizes that map and that creation differently. Then there's the things that Wayfinder does that other projects don't do. So it does, building and deploying smart contracts. It also has, organizational structures that you can deploy. So you can say like, I want to create an agent that, is the CEO, and then there's like the analyst agent and other different agents in this framework, and they're going to work together to this mission objective. So I think and like there's also contemplation. I think if you've seen the demos and the beta around, not contemplation, but we're working towards prediction agents and social agents as well. Social agents we've had for some time. We just, everyone else is doing that. So we're like, whatever, you guys do that stuff. And because we have that from, but like, it's not, that wasn't dismissive. Sorry, I don't want to come off like that. It's more just like, we do that with Colony, right? So like, it would be weird if we release the Colony infrastructure before we release the game to create social agents.
Right.
It's just like, it's less interesting because it's less complicated. And so, at least for us. So I think what my point is that like most of them are either social or transactional in nature. And then there's like all these other things that Wayfinder does. And so really what you're trying to do is to create like the place where, and the infrastructure where, yeah, sure, you do all your transactions and it does them really well. But there's a lot more you can do because like network interactions are not limited to transactions. You should be contributing to the networks you really love. You should be building stuff. Like let's say there's a token you really think is cool. You can say like, let's create a smart contract where, this token that you really love, you can deposit it. And every Saturday there's a draw, and whoever, wins the draw gets all the tokens in the contract, less 3%, which you're going to convert to ETH or Sol as your rake. And if you withdraw before the draw on Saturdays, then charge a 5%, early withdrawal fee. And then everyone can just go use it. So like, I think like you can create all kinds of fun things. And I think the objective is not just transact, but it's transact, build, kind of create new opportunity for yourself beyond just, playing the edge game and trading.
Yeah. It's fascinating when you think of it in the launch pad mindset of like what in 2021. I think back to how hard it was to launch an NFT project originally. Before OpenSea did their shared contract, and before like Manifold came out with their like studio, you have to go find a team, or you have to teach yourself how to code, and you have to figure out how to do generative art, and like it was very complex. And then that got eroded by all of these basically throughputs to being like, all right, I want this, click, boom, launch. Okay, I have an NFT project. And then recently we've seen this on the token side, Solana specifically with Pump.Fun. All of a sudden became very easy to just have an idea and turn that out into a token that's launched live on mainnet. Now what we're looking at is the opportunity to have an idea where it's not even like an agent specific thing. It is a crypto addressive product where you can basically have any idea. So would you guys are like building like a launch pad of anything technically, right?
Pretty much. I mean, like you could, whatever because you have an autonomous agent outside of your kind of like,
Right.
co-pilot trading agent. So you could make it whatever you want. You can make a social agent. You can make a prediction market agent. You can really like, it can do all those things, and you can create an org rather than a single agent. Like these are all things that Wayfinder can do. I think, or we are working on executing. I think the things that are like highly functional and ready to go today pretty much are just the trading and the social and the building agent. But I think ultimately, the way we think about it is like, it won't just, it should be like a creativity platform. Like I think about it a lot more like an iPad or like Apple, like an iPhone or something. It's like what you're after really is like a place where you can be creative, and yes, your creativity can be, can be in a trade that you think is really interesting, or it could be like, oh, I see an opportunity to create a smart contract that I think would be really cool, or I see, an opportunity to create an efficiency by having a bunch of agents do this thing together. And so, like, I think the objective is to create a place where all of that happens, and not just, it being isolated to one thing. And I think there's like maybe this idea that like, if, you have to do that, you have to do the trading really well. And that 100% is the case. You have to be the best at trading. You have to be the best at building. You have to be the best at, autonomous agents. You have to be the best at, organizational structure agents. And so like those things are all true. But I think what you ultimately get as a result is like, because like if you don't have that whole package, we're still going to have fragmentation. Is the point, I think.
Right.
And so, and like what you want to do is to create the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail includes those pieces, and it'll likely expand, right? Like it'll likely grow with time. But ultimately, it's very different than both in its approach on the trading side. It's very different than other kind of people who are trying to build this stuff. And in its like fundamentals of what it offers, it's very, very different. But on the trading side, it maybe can be perceived as yielding a similar result.
That
Is
is
that fair? I don't know, Adrian.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Hunter, about like being able to, not just deploy a token, not just deploy an NFT project, but deploy like an entire ecosystem of like contracts that, work with each other, and then immediately, we definitely want that to happen. And that is starting to happen already within the test groups. But then also you want to be able to hook up that like ecosystem of contracts and assets to like a group of people who are using the platform already, and like they can go battle test it and try stuff out and like build on top of it is kind of like what we are envisioning with the contract agent.
right. Good point there. Battle testing as a framework. Like when you're a developer, you don't just go straight to production. You have a test bed. How are you guys approaching like, hey, before this goes live and you have real capital at risk, or before you deploy the swarm of agents that go do all these things? Like how are you approaching the safety protocol, the jail, like that's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
big area.
from the contract side, there's not too many guardrails or anything like that. But because like, it's a smart contract, you want to try stuff, you want to see how things work, experiment, and iterate. On the path side, though, that's where things are a little bit more scrutinized. So the way it works right now is that like you go in and you say like, you want to create a path to do, or actually, let's say that you've deployed a staking contract, and you say, okay, now I want to open this staking contract up to like the rest of Wayfinder by creating a path to the staking contract. Maybe you stick your USDC in it, you get a different token. In that case, you would like you'd say like, okay, I want to add this staking contract to the context. I want to add, whatever other assets to the context. I want to create this path. The agent will go through and like do a quick assessment of like how sketchy it is, and then it'll help you out with the code to actually, it'll do most of the coding. It'll do all of the coding for you to be able to like send that path out to the rest of the like Wayfinder user base. Before it hits the Wayfinder user base, though, it has to go through this whole process of validation. So it goes out to a network of validators. They like take a look at it. They've got their own agents. They have their own human voting. And then if they do say that it's reasonable, it's not like a giant rug, then it'll be like okay to be added
Promoted.
to the
Yeah,
And
promoted.
then even on top of that, then there's collateral that has to be put up, correct?
Yeah.
And collateral, like if something has low collateral or your transaction is below the collateral amount, like we'll warn you, right? So like even if it has been promoted, and let's say like if it's been promoted and it's very low usage, so it's a relatively new path, just like you see on trading systems, on dexes and stuff, it's like, oh, it's unverified, or like we don't know this token, it's new, whatever. You'll see like, okay, you're above the collateral amount. Do you still want to proceed? Only X number of transactions have been put through this. Do you want to still proceed? So I think like putting safeguards in kind of in the consumer's hands is super important. So, and I think essentially there's two stages to it. One is like the verification. There's three stages. One's like verification, be it digital, through AI or humans. The next stage is collateralizing, and then the next stage is like awareness, right? So really three safeguards that you want to put in place at minimum. And I'm oversimplifying it for clarity's sake.
Understood. Yeah, no, obviously there's a lot more that goes into that, but I think the big thing for people to understand is there is a process in place for this just not being like the wild west that we've seen in other areas.
Well, I still think it'll be the Wild West, like just not in the same way. I think like it's going to open up a lot of possibilities when everyone can start building stuff that if they like whatever interesting ideas are going to come out where they don't need to hire developers to do it. They're just going to start making things that otherwise they would never be able to make. And that's going to kind of create all, because you can explore the showcase of all the smart contracts that have been built via Wayfinder, and people are going to be looking at that stuff, I think. So I think it is going to still be, a Cambrian explosion because now everyone can contribute, but maybe not in the same way of like how nefarious it's been in the Wild West in some of the previous cycles we've seen.
Sure, I can appreciate that answer. Putting the power back in the people's hands. Two groups that come to mind, and I'm curious if you agree or if you think there's another group I might be overlooking. One is artists. I think artists, for the longest time, have had these. They're very creative people. They've thought outside the box. And we saw this with the NFT cycle for sure, and somewhat with the meme coin cycle. But they have these such creative minds, but they've had to rely on people that understand smart contracts in the industry. This puts the power for them to be like, okay, I have this wild activation idea, and then they can just do it. The other side of this is the people that have been watching and lurking on the timeline and been like, oh man, like if only I had the time to learn, or I don't know anybody, I'm a small account. All of a sudden, the playing field becomes very equal. I'm excited for that. Do you think those are two primary groups? Do you think there's one that you're excited to see interact with this and produces like really exciting things?
I think on the smart contract side, you got it right. I think those two groups are obviously kind of have the most upside, right? To be able to use this stuff because like they're creators, they're makers. They want to create more things and interesting things that they feel otherwise they can't without this product. I think on the trading side and transaction side, I think people who are looking for edge is going to be a totally different group. People who want to loop transactions, people who want to create conditional transactions, people who've never done a transaction but now can do it because it's much easier. They don't need to have again this list of different sites and bridges and things they need to go to use to be able to do it. So I think there's going to be a number of cohorts. I think originally a lot of people maybe assumed that it was going to be like a developer-focused platform. And I think obviously developers will be able to utilize it and create wayfinding paths and contribute to it, but also non-developers will be able to. So I think there's going to be a lot of different ways in which people use it, which I think is a good thing because it seems like it's a tool that in the hands. It's really a tool that that whatever is created is dependent on the hands of the maker rather than being so specific that it's like. And people will find and tell you that it's amazing at this or it's amazing at that. I'm sure those use cases will pop up, but generally it's like limited not by it's limited by the creativity of the human more so than anything. It's like if you assume that like this stuff is at a level of general, like let's say AGI, but it lacks the kind of context. Now let's assume you've given it context because that's what Wayfinder does, and then it's the question is what do you do with it? And the answer, I think, is, well, what is the thing that you want to make? Or what is the transaction you want to execute or achieve? What is your goal? And that is where it essentially supplements a lot of other existing systems and a lot of other people to help it achieve that goal. So, yeah.
One other area I think that is also kind of relevant because we've talked a lot like how this affects certain people. I think rolling this back into like Parallel, the parent company overall, you guys have a large community of holders. You have also a token, and I guess now 2 tokens with Prompt coming to life. Can you touch on like the community's role within all of this? Because I think there was a vote that was passed on how to approach Wayfinder, if I'm correct in recalling what I saw online. But like, how does the community play into like what you're building now?
Yeah. So Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, so I think a lot of people who play parallel also, there are a subset of people who are super technical and been in the space forever, but there's also just a lot of people who play the game because it's fun. And like, if you want to play the game, you can download it on Epic, right? Like you don't
Yep.
need to have a wallet. So like, I think there is a large cohort of people in the community who are highly technical, who are very sophisticated, um, you know, who fall into that category. And then there's a huge group of people, and it's growing, that are not in that category. And so, how do you create a product that makes it easier for all of them as well? I think the community, and kind of, there was a vote, as to whether or not the TGE should occur in Q1. That passed, and so, and the way that the community has kind of, been offered the ability to obtain the vast majority of the token supply, which is like, I think it's like 40% of the total tokens are allocated to people who deposit Prime into this Wayfinder.ai. And so, really, the objective there is to say, like, hey, community of people, like, we went through this really interesting journey. We've really enjoyed the card game, and we have Colony coming out. We actually have a third-person shooter coming out, but we discovered something along the way. How do we make sure that those people, are acknowledged in that process of another thing that's not a game being created? And this is really just our way of saying, like, hey, like, if you have Prime that you've earned from playing the game, or were really early holder, or you've accumulated it along the way, you can come along on the ride, and decide whether or not you think this is going to be valuable. And I think like 52 or 53% of the entire supply of Prime is now deposited into Wayfinder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like over half the token supply is in Wayfinder. It's really just like us saying, I think part of it is like, the feedback we provided to Foundation when all this occurred was like, we really want to make sure that the community who supported us and made all this possible participate in a really material way. But also, like, they need the collateral for this to all work. Because, the collateral token has to be put up. One, there's a native yield from the protocol, in terms of bounties and things like this, to incentivize some of the creation process outside of the rake, or the bips on the transaction. But two, like, who's better to kind of receive a lot of this prompt than the people who have been, really big supporters of ours. Because again, like you said earlier, right, like over a year and a half ago or a year ago, we started talking about this stuff, and it was like very over most people's heads at the time. We sounded pretty crazy.
That's become this a very clear theme throughout, I think, the history of crypto, is the early movers have always sounded crazy until they haven't.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like in the last 2 weeks, everyone's like, it's maybe 3 weeks or whatever, since like some of these other frameworks have popped up, or other people have popped up kind of doing this stuff. So I think, yeah, like really it's just our ecosystem. And like, maybe the way to think about it, I've used this analogy before, and I know it's not perfect because people be like, oh, you're comparing yourself to Microsoft, but like, that's not the case. But Microsoft has like, World of Warcraft because it owns Blizzard. Microsoft also has Microsoft Excel. It'd be very strange to me if the demand for Microsoft Excel licenses impacted the cost of a shield in World of Warcraft. And so really, like, one's a game ecosystem, one's a tool. And, but it doesn't mean that the people who, because like, you started out as a game studio, and like, yes, we love the game, we're going to continue to build the game, we have another expansion set out, we have 2 more games coming out, but like, it doesn't mean that you can't build this tool, especially when it was like a byproduct of the game. And maybe it's like a reverse Slack story or something. Slack started out as a game, that ended up becoming like a tool. And it's like, for us, it's, could be kind of analogous. Not that it's a perfect example either, but I think generally the objective is just like, we love Parallel as a game and as an IP. We don't want to stop working on that, but there's this enormous, shift occurring globally, and like, we can't ignore it. It's too important for us to not participate, even if our people opposed us when we first suggested this. We had to insist that we go down this road because everything is going to be impacted by this. And so there was no world in which we weren't doing this. The question was just like, how do we ensure that everyone comes along with us? And the answer we constructed was, something to this effect, where you can deposit Prime and you can earn prompt, and then you can participate in both economies. It's not perfect by any means,
but no, there's tons of like things that you could pull specifically within that. I mean, I think the idea of like macros inside Excel. That idea, that concept that they built into that, and they went, oh my God, this is gonna take all of this tedious work out of Excel users' hands.
Yeah.
Well, that eventually made its way to World of Warcraft, where instead of having to click, 10 different abilities and all these, like, you literally just click one thing and it happens.
Yeah.
And obviously that concept existed, but like there are little mechanisms within different product groups that you see companies always discover, and then they look and say, well, we can apply that here and elevate the experience, differentiate ourselves, and bring in more users because all of a sudden it got easier to use.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think everything, it really does impact everything, right? Like, it makes it easier for our community members and for non-community members to interact with all these different blockchains and find opportunities for themselves as well. So I don't want to make it sound like it's isolated to just people who are early Parallel supporters, because that's not the case. It's just for everyone. And that's why the brands are separated, the tools are separated from the game studio. But yeah, it was really like, there's no perfect way to do this, but sometimes you feel something with so much urgency when we first kind of thought through this and kind of looked a bit into the future and asked ourselves where this is going to go. And you're just like, I don't know if it's definitely not going to be perfect. It'll probably be a bit messy at times, but what that means is that it's urgent and that we have no choice but to go down this path because this is extremely important. And that's how we felt about it.
Do you still feel that like urgency? Like you wake up every day and you're like, I gotta go. Like, I mean, is that
ever
still there? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't go away, right? And it's not like, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away on the, like, I don't feel my excitement hasn't diminished for Parallel, nor has it diminished for the urgency diminished for Wayfinder. I think the urgency for Wayfinder feels like it's growing. I feel like we're kind of approaching these points where, just the magnitude of impact, like, and if whoever wins in this segment, is going to have an enormous amount of influence and impact on all systems and throughput. And it needs to be done correctly. And yeah, we just thought that like this was something that we couldn't not do this. So I still feel that way. It's just like, if there's anything I think I was tweeting this the other day. I was saying like, if there's anything worth working on outside of Parallel, it's this. And like, otherwise, what are you doing? Like that's how I feel about it. I don't see any like, and that's not to, sorry, I should say, like, I don't want to sound like, oh, I'm speaking disparagingly about people who build L1s and people who build cool dexes and cool games. That's not the case. But like, to me, there's like an existential, there's an opportunity that seems somewhat existential almost in this. And I think a number of people see it that way. I don't think they all see it the same. I think some of us see it, from just different lenses. But yeah, like I just,
when you say existential, do you mean you as like a company or like
no,
industry?
I mean,
or I'm curious.
As an industry, I think it's like an evolution leap, right? I think existential meaning like there is this understanding that this changes everything. And like it's easy to like kind of put it into this category of like it's a LARP or whatever, because it's like it's not there yet, or the social agents don't appear to have had that much impact or whatever. But like some of them will make the leap to utility. Some of them will kind of find their way into this place, which is like entirely autonomous, organizational and structure, has full execution access across every network and every smart contract, perfect information. Like that is. It's almost hard to comprehend the implications of something like that. All you know is that you need to be a block on that foundational architecture, and that is what matters. If you're not a pillar or a block at the foundation of what's built on top of that, I think that's a huge missed opportunity. And that's what I mean by existential. I think it's just like so important to win there and participate there, and contribute to something that's fundamentally going to shift the way the industry works.
And just from like a technological perspective, like it's just accelerating. Like the stuff that we couldn't do 3 months ago is like now possible because of like a bunch of research papers and some, starry-eyed computer scientists. So, yeah, the urgency has never been higher to
Yeah,
create something
it's
cool.
weird because you got to build with urgency, but then you have to
Yeah,
like consume with urgency because
Exactly.
yeah, the landscape shifts under your feet quite a lot. And like, we were talking, Adrian and I always talk about like Wright's law and the diminishing cost. I think like when we started this and we ran Colony or Wayfinder for the first time, it was like thousands and thousands of dollars. And now it's just like, irrelevant from a cost base almost. And so, and that law of kind of cost, continuing to collapse down is just going to make it even more prevalent as a product. Like, why would you not want the support of an intelligent agent over? It'll avoid mistakes. Like it'll save you time. It'll avoid mistakes. It's almost like the emergence of a new level of convenience on top of this entire stack. But like you're not giving up your edge. You're not giving up your opportunities. You're actually expanding them.
Exactly. I mean, Adrian, with your very technical background, I remember because my background is in artificial intelligence, leading business development group. Um, I just remember I would every day was like I would go on Reddit, I would go on TechCrunch. I mean, it doesn't matter where there could be like I would call it alpha back in the day. Like you are looking for what is breaking, what is changing, who's building. Um, and I think a lot of people right now are stuck in this echo chamber of, okay, well, what's happening within AI ML inside of Web3? I mean, that is such a small little like pimple on the moon of like what is happening within the industry. What are you seeing outside of it that you're like, wait, this down the road when this hits us and people within Web3 experience this, it's going to be even more game changing.
yeah. I mean, I think the two biggest or the two most exciting things are on the like game side and on the language model side. On the game side now, like you can have I mean, a lot of people have probably seen the demos of Doom and things like that, where they like recreate the entire game. And I think there's been research since then that like you can create entire games because they've trained on like a large corpus of games, not just like recreate Doom frame by frame, but like have a text prompt and like create your own experience. It's not perfect by far, but that'll hit eventually, and it'll have lots of impacts on gaming, and it'll have lots of impacts on gaming crypto and crypto in general, I think. And then on the LLM side, there's just like a ton of really interesting research that's come out on the test time inference. It was kind of like a bit of a question mark as to like how OpenAI did it, and like there was some rumblings about how they've done it, and then in the last several months, it's like very clear. Like there were a couple of really interesting papers from some Chinese labs that came out that like broke it down basically, and then very recently, there's some papers that came out that are like, okay, well, we can basically recreate it for $400. So yeah, so like I think eventually everybody's going to have their own O1. They're going to have their own test time thinker, and that's definitely like what we're implementing on the Wayfinder side. Yeah, I mean, it just means that these agents are going to get better and better and more capable.
So
Actually,
go ahead.
No, I didn't realize you were coming from the AI space as well. And I'll tell you something funny. I think maybe a bit you can relate to it. So Adrian had come to me, and I always leave this part out because I don't want to like scare anyone with this story. But Adrian came to me and was like, "Yeah, like you need to read this paper." And like I was like humming and hawing a bit. I was like, "Okay, like I'm processing some of this stuff and like and the implications of it and thinking it through." And Adrian's like, "Look, I need to do this, man. Like I came like this is my bread and butter. Like get on side." Or like get out of my way kind of attitude. And then I adopted that from him,
Right.
really that mentality. But I think like that inflection point was very real. And I think everyone will have it. The technical people had it earlier, right? This like moment of like, oh shit, it's now. And I think more and more, like a lot of people, the vast majority of our parents or our sisters or our brothers, like probably if they're not technical, don't really fully understand the implications of all this stuff.
They have no
And
idea.
no, they really don't. But we'll give them a little bit of grace. Like it will come for yeah, but it'll come for them, right? And I think like it really like we're on this scale of like when you pick up the importance of what's happening, and I think that's limited by your technical knowledge. And Adrian was really the one who like was like yeah, like we're doing this thing. Like you need
Oh,
to
it
get
wasn't even
outside.
so Adrian was like, it's
Yeah,
not a question, like this
yeah,
is
yeah.
happening whether you wanted to or you
Yeah,
don't. Like
yeah. It was just like get inside now, and and as I worked with him and some of the other folks on the AI team, I was like, okay, like I'm awake now. I get it. Yeah,
I remember the moment I had it, which I mean, I was tasked to do basically build out an Excel sheet for the data aggregation for a vertical farm. And I remember sitting there being like, there's got to be a smart way to do it. And I had just read an article on AI and I was like, this is it. And I actually, without telling my bosses, spent 6 months building out, learning AI and building that out all out, going against all of the rules, all of what they had asked me, purely just for. I was like, I have to. There's this is the only way
yeah.
to go
That's
forward.
the feeling, right? You're like, I have to do this, and like when the sooner people kind of comprehend. And I think we've seen some of like the more notable social care, like influencers and stuff on Twitter. Like I think like Thread Guy's a great example. Like he recently had this like epiphany publicly about the importance of this stuff, and that like it's not going away. It's only going to become, it's only accelerating. It's only going to become more important and more prevalent. And so like really the question is like how do you as a group, be it an open source group or a company or whatever, how do you envision this being implemented? What are the things that you think are necessary? How do you package this and create the great world, the greatest product that solves problems for people and makes everything more accessible and blah blah blah. And so, but like we're watching now some of the kind of like Web3 technical folks debate it or have their epiphany. And I think we're now, on the timeline, probably going to start to see more and more people understand this. Um, yeah.
I've always looked at it as like it increases speed, it increases convenience, and reduces friction.
Yeah. It's
As
Amazon.
a
It's like the Amazonification of blockchain or something. Like, like people, I think a lot of people are going to kind of eventually find themselves understanding the exact same thing you do. And I think a lot of it will come from high quality products, like their interactions with those products, like Wayfinder.
Mm,
And I'm sure there's going to be other great products out there. But I think generally that's their moment, is their aha moment's going to be when they can touch it and feel it for themselves the first time. And, and I think like that's on the tooling side, and on the gaming side, I think people are going to have an aha moment when, they're talking to a character, an NPC that is like, let's call it like near sentient or,
I mean, remember you used to have 3 options for, like, chatting with a character in gaming,
yeah,
that was,
click,
like
click,
that was
click.
interesting. It was like, "Okay, what conversation path am I gonna go down?" And, you probably have, like, a couple thousand different, like, character story paths you could go down. Now I feel like you'll have games where you almost don't know, like, the devs don't even know, like, what a possible ending could be,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, we don't know what the ending for Colony is. This is exactly the stuff that we deal with, where we're like, like we can create events, and like what we've concluded is like you can create events that impact society, and that can be your control mechanism. So you're playing God a bit, like in that like a solar storm that can be an event, and like but how they react to the solar storm and what they do collectively, you can create the win condition and you can create the event, but how they get to the win condition is entirely, there is no predictability to it. And so like it's a very different thing. This is what I was trying to allude to around earlier when I said there's no frame of reference.
there is
Um,
none.
there is none. Yeah. And actually early on we knew this, and we were thinking about what kind of game we wanted to build. We bought like playgod.ai because we thought, oh, like wouldn't it be fun to kind of like think about it, like all these people are praying and like you can be a god and you can choose to like whose prayers you answer and whose you don't. And then like you're kind of if you imagine a world with like hundreds, millions of or billions of these agents, it, it's almost like the gods are competing for faith. But then we were like, oh no, that's like something we probably don't want to do because it's just like a whole nother IP or whatever. But so we decided to keep it to parallel and stay in vein of what we really love anyways. But yeah, I just think that there's so much unexplored space here, that and so much opportunity that we're going to see very unpredictable and incredible things happen. And I think if we provide the right tooling and infrastructure to agents to do, to be more capable, the possibility and probability of that being beneficial to people is very high. And that's what we're after.
Wow. I on the game side comparable, I think have you ever watched Rick and Morty, the episode where what is it, Ron, where he like puts on and he like lives this guy's like life
Oh
for
yeah.
like you don't know, like, and they're all like, oh my god, he took Ron off the grid, like you know, like you don't know what that path ends up being, and so there are all these unexpected and unique story arcs that you get. It is incredible. Um, Guys, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to hop on here and chat. This has been eye-opening to me, and I think for a lot of people, even I know I had a lot of people that were early TCG holders of yours who basically, when I brought this up, they're like, "What the fuck are they doing?" I mean, like, this is you guys. It makes sense. There is a real cohesion to what you are building as a company. Um, I don't know if there's anything you guys want to leave people with, any takes, any suggestions, any asks for people that are listening. Um,
Sure. Yeah, sure. Maybe I can give them some just stuff to follow to stay up to date.
yeah,
On definitely follow Parallel TCG on Twitter. We have a mobile coming in Q1 for the TCG. I think today the foundation just announced a pretty big prize pool for next year as well, because we have our finals coming up at the end of, I think, February or March for the first World Championships. If you're interested in Colony, you can follow at Parallel Colony, which is the AI simulation game that's coming out on mobile and iOS and Android in Q1 as well. If you're interested in Wayfinder, you can follow at AI Wayfinder, and you can go to Wayfinder.ai to read the paper and or participate in the caching should you choose. We're just really grateful to everyone who supported us over the years. We're fortunate enough to be able to do something we really love, which is Parallel and a world that we get to create, and two, something that's very cutting edge technically and we're really curious about, which is Wayfinder. So thank you to everyone who made that possible, and thank you to you, Hunter, for having us. And hopefully a lot of people get to see this and learn something.
I hope somebody learns something or takes something away from this. I know I did, so I think the likelihood of them not is very low. Um, Thank you guys again. Appreciate it. We'll stay up to touch to what you're building, and I'm certainly looking forward to what the future of Wayfinder, Parallel Colonies, everything that you guys are dreaming and building lies ahead. So thank you so much, everybody tuned in. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Thanks.